Yo, okay, so I'm going to try and explain foundation versus finished floor on a structure, quick and simple. Here's a good way to look at it. So this is a 4-inch wall. It's a brick wide, just one brick here. And it's an 8-inch wall on the bottom. When you're doing a structure, you always want the amount of pressure the footer can hold more than what the wall can hold. So if you think of it like if you push just your index finger in one spot compared to like if you pushed your elbow in a spot, how much the weight and the pressure is dispersed laterally. So when you have a 4-inch wall, you want an 8-inch base. If you have a 6-inch wall, you usually want a 12 or 16-inch base, and then it goes up from there. And you almost want to look at it like your footer to create a triangle, the outside edges of the bottom of your footer to create a triangle onto your wall so that there's no lateral push. As the weight goes down, if you were thinking about if you were to karate chop a brick, right? When the guys karate chop the 5 bricks, which brick breaks first? The bottom brick breaks first. So that's because there's no lateral pressure on that bottom brick, and it doesn't have that triangulated structure. That's what the footer does. You put this block in so that when that index finger of pressure goes on the top of that first brick, even though it's 7 bricks tall, that index finger of pressure creates a lot of pressure on one small area, and then it's dispersed laterally as it goes. You know, every bit of downward force is argued with by lateral force in physics. So the more downward force there is on a smaller object, it's easier to push the wider thing out, where on something wider, when you push right in the center, it's harder to separate it because of the lateral force that it holds within itself. So if you think about a footer, when you build your wall, if this is your 2x4 she shed, even if you wanted to pour without doing a separate footer like this, and then a finished floor separate like that, what you can do is when you dig your floor, you dig this 5 inches for your finished floor, and then say a foot out, you dig the dirt down to 2 feet, a foot away from your wall, and then about 4 or 6 inches out on the outside, and you just fill the concrete thicker so that the perimeter of the building has that footer. You don't have to do a separate footer like this. This was clearly made. Like if you look at this building, clearly this footer was made, this floor was poured in, and then the wall was built over the top of it. That's the basic algorithm to any structure. To any structure, when you build a house, if you went to the house I'm building right now is already done, but I'll try to take some videos on Monday and show you what I'm talking about on that. But they built the footer everywhere. They built all the frames for the footer and poured them in with concrete. And they took all the frames away, and then they filled the floor in with the finished floor. And on most houses, this is where we were talking just a second ago. You said, does it go flush or does it go above? Always, when you do a footer, you always give yourself 2 inches, at least 2 inches. That's when your hot water heater breaks. That's a water spill, whatever, to get it out and it doesn't saturate your wall. Just imagine if this is sheet rock and tubas here, and you're gonna have a tuba on here as your sill plate. At least you have this 2 inches of concrete built into your footer that the water will go here and flow out. And so you don't saturate, whatever, even if it's a she shed, if it's a house, if it's a 2-story building, it doesn't matter if it's an apartment complex, the algorithm is the same. The size of the footer, the width of the footer, the size of the wall, all of those numbers multiply within themselves. There's an algorithm to all of that. Static weight, structural weight, how much pressure. But what you want to do is, if you're planning on building a building on top of this pad, you can do your floor, build your slab, all one slab. It's fine. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have that lip. You can use pressure treated to create that lip I was just talking to you about, that water spill lip. You can use pressure treated. Just silicone the hell out of the bottom of the pressure treated, put the pressure treated down, bolt them in. That will create your barrier. But when you do your slab, cut your dirt down. Have all this 5 inches cut down to a foot, 18 inches, whatever, and go over and just pour that fat all the way around the perimeter. And if you know, like hypothetically, you know right here, you're gonna have a lift, you're gonna have a post right here, and you're gonna have a post right here. Well, maybe right here, you dig this down to 10 or 12, 14 inches by like 2 feet, and you just pour a big fat spot right here so that you know you have the weight. What you're looking for is the downward pressure. What you have to think about is the downward pressure, the PSI. Most concrete is 3,000 to 5,000 PSI. That's per square inch. So when you're talking about a 4x4 post, if you're using 5,000, that's 20,000 pounds of downward force that 4-inch square can hold. Times 2, one on each side. So that's 40,000 pounds of pressure. That's a lot of your semi-truck pressure. So you don't have to think about running a 10-inch concrete slab. You're holding up goddamn jumbo jets. You're holding up anything. You don't need all of that. If you have it planned out to where you know where you're going with things, if you know where the walls are going to be and where a lift might be hypothetically in the future, just plan for it and dig down. Go to 6 inches, go to 8 inches. It doesn't have to be 10 inches. If you want to be completely certain that things aren't going to move around, spend the money on compacting the dirt below and giving yourself a good solid grade, a good solid flat bottom in the dirt, and make sure your dirt is nice and solid and packed for your concrete to sit on. It's not, the concrete is hard. Once it's dry, it's hard and it's solid, right? The problem with concrete cracking is that the soil below it, if it's a clay soil, then it gets all rubbery, right? When it's clay, it absorbs a bunch of water and it releases a bunch of water, and it gets bigger and smaller, and it creates problems. It will create a crack, or what it will create is a culvert underneath the concrete, and then water will run underneath the concrete and erode the water underneath that, and then when the clay dries out next year, it drops even more, and then all of a sudden that corner of the building drops more than anything else, and you get a funky ass crack across your shop. So if you really want to spend your money properly, don't go 10 inches in concrete, don't go crazy 12-inch, half-inch rebar, just 3/8 rebar, 18-inch center squares. You could even do 24-inch center squares, and just spend the money on compacting your soil properly and making your pad that you lay the concrete on as perfectly flat as possible so that there's no chance of future water running through it. When your grade underneath your concrete pad is at an angle, you have dirt, you have dirt layer, and then you have usually 2 inches of crushed gravel, 3/4 inch crushed gravel, and that's to let water and moisture go through without floating your concrete away. And then you have your concrete sitting on top of that. You want your dirt, the very bottom level, as hard and flat as possible. And then you put your rock, so it's hard and flat and the rock compacts. And then you put your concrete on that. And as long as you have your subgrade as good as possible, your concrete should never crack. You don't have to think about 10 inches or 8 inches, any of that. That's semi-truck with jack stands, crazy weight. You don't have to do all that. 6 inches, 4 inches is plenty. 5 inches is great, and just give yourself little deep spots where the lift is going to be, dig a little extra trench, go an extra 2 inches down, maybe 6 inches on each side of the lift. So you have a 8-inch plate, go 20 inches total. Go 8-inch plate and 6 inches on each side, and then just taper your at 40, 38 and a half degrees, not necessarily a 45, but go 38 degrees, taper your dirt, and go down an extra 4 or 6 inches. And that gives that downward pressure, that separation. When concrete breaks, it breaks laterally. Okay, it always breaks laterally. So as long as you have more available lateral strength, the further down you go, your pressure point won't matter how much you put, as long as you calculate the right amount of lateral strength below it. And that's ultimately what a footer is. It's just instead of making the entire wall 12 inches thick, they make a 12-inch footer and put a 4-inch wall on it, and the 4-inch wall cannot produce enough static pressure to break that 12-inch because of the lateral strength of it. So you have to just think of it like it splits down the middle. Concrete splits down the middle. Like when you crack an egg, it just splits down the middle. So when you think about concrete, you think about how much static pressure you're putting on one point, and then think about how much lateral pressure it's going to take to hold that weight. That's why there's different footers for 2-story house or 3-story house or an apartment complex, or a water store. Hypothetically, it's just a water store, a fueling station may have way bigger footers because you have this, 8 pounds a gallon liquid that's condensed in this very small area. You may need a really strong footer because that's a lot of pressure put down on small, and then now you have these 2 little legs on each side that's holding all of this weight. You may need a much bigger footer. But something like a she shed or even a garage, a 1-bedroom house, a 1-story house, you don't need a gigantic footer, and you don't have to do a footer separate from a floor. You can just pour your floor, dig your dirt out. When you get on your rebar, it's going to go across, and then you're going to get into the deep spot. Usually what you want to do is take like 2-foot or 3-foot lengths of rebar, hammer them down into the ground, bend them, and tie them into your cross pieces so that they're tied into the ground. And then when the concrete gets on there, they will be kind of a lateral source to keep the whole pad from moving left or right. And then your sideways rebar is going to keep things from squishing in or out or pulling left or right. So it holds everything together. Okay, I hope that helps. If not, ask me more questions. I'll tell you the next thing.